Good morning, everybody. It is June the 16th, in case you were wondering, 2020, the longest few months of many of our lifetimes, I believe. I'm here with what some call the Brain Trust from the Center of Leadership and Learning. This group, Shara, Dean, Nancy, Todd, some of the brightest educators that I've ever met, fantastic people, even more important. Most of them are, except Dean, who I love with all my heart. But Dean's also got a book that he wrote. Do people know that? I've been reading this book of Dean's that is stellar. You guys ought to check it out as soon as we publish it, which Dean is like, oh, good. I hope you're going to do that soon. Anyways, more to come on that. We are talking today. Todd's going to lead us, and they're going to tell you all about this new series that we're going to be kicking off called the Virtual Leadership Series starting in July, which is essentially these four, the Brain Trust, coming together to help you get ready for back to school. So they'll tell you about that. I'll share you some links so you can sign up. With that, Todd, take it over and have fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. So to start out today, I think it's important for those that haven't ever seen us to just start out by introducing ourselves. So I'll go by the order of my screen. So Shara, then Dean, then Nancy. So go ahead, Shara, kick it off. Tell us a little bit about you and your experience and what you're doing in education.
So I live in Nebraska. I am a math teacher gone rogue. And so I have turned into a curriculum coordinator who basically became part of the Canvas implementation at our school district. And it kind of just propelled from there. I went from being a curriculum director to working for Canvas to not working for Canvas. And now I support schools with Canvas in Nebraska. And so I work with a whole bunch of districts. And we actually just launched or just announced a statewide kind of initiative. So kind of excited about that. But I work with a lot of schools in Nebraska, and my focus is blended learning in Canvas.
Right on. And I'm Dean Wilson. And this should be free flow. Let's Brady Bunch. High five. Whoops. Well, we'll have to figure out what way we high five there. My name's Dean Wilson. I'm super excited to be here today. I've had every role in education, all the way from a custodial helper to assistant superintendent of schools, and currently I am the vice president of student services for a technical college. So I've been a secondary principal, a middle school principal. More than anything else, I've been a jack of all and a master of none. I think that when you're green, you grow. When you're ripe, you rot. And I am excited for what the future of education might hold. So with that, we'll go down one to Nancy.
All right, bumping up to you, Dean. Nancy Brightwell from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm currently an executive director serving some of our most challenged schools in Charlotte. And I have been a school leader at all levels, elementary, middle, and high, for 20 years before moving to the district level, where I have the good pleasure currently of supporting about 15 principals, all different levels. And it has been a ride this year, right, guys? We've learned a lot, grown a lot. And as you said, Dean, you got to keep growing and learning.
Awesome. And for those that are listening, you may notice throughout this little webinar we're doing some Deanisms. That's kind of our joke, is that so if you see us clicking our button, that's our Deanism button. Like when you
I wanted to do it so bad.
When you wet, you're hot. When you green, you grow. Yeah. So if we hit that Dean button, you'll hear Dean can go on and on with just perfect ways of summing up everything that we're learning. So something I think that's unique about all of us is we just went around and introduced ourselves and talked about like our current experience in education, what we're doing. But in addition to that, like so many others, we wear multiple hats, and we're part of the expert consultants with the Center for Leadership and Learning here at Instructure. And so we get a unique perspective, not just on what's going on in our schools or districts or the technical college, but we also get to see some of the best things that are happening throughout the country and how other people are really addressing the issues with this pandemic and trying to promote good quality learning wherever students are. And so I want to kind of take us through our experience in terms of where were you when all of this happened? By that, not, where physically were you located, but just to kind of help people understand we were all in the same boat. Tell us where you were when, like what your schools were doing and how prepared you were when this all hit. So I'm going to start with Nancy at that district level. where were your schools at when they suddenly realized we have to go remote?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we had first and foremost, our whole state is Canvas in terms of an LMS, but everybody wasn't using that. So we had people using Google Classroom, people who just still relied on just paper pencil notebooks in terms of organizing their content and where they were and pacing and that kind of thing. We had some district level resources that were not all in one place. And so we already knew that we had some challenges with people being able to get their hands around what they needed to teach quality instruction for all kids. In terms of devices, we were 1-to-1 using Chromebooks for third grade up. So we were in fairly good shape there. So we were just kind of all over the place. PLCs were something that we really talked a lot about in terms of two major purposes, how we come together and plan instruction together for all kids, and then how we use formative data specifically to guide future instruction. So we had some pretty good processes for that. We had never, ever, ever thought about what might that look like in a virtual environment. So we were scrambling, to say the least, to try and figure out how to make school portable and all the systems and structures that we held tight to that defined us.
Yeah, so I have a follow-up question with that. So when you say that you're like third through whatever grades were 1-to-1, were those like devices that stayed at the school, or were those ones that you guys allowed students to take home?
Yeah, so we had just begun actually letting students take them home. So high school, this was the first year that high school students actually took their devices home. Middle school and fourth and fifth grade picked up their device and carried it with them and then dropped it back off to be recharged at the end of the day.
So you at least had some sort of a process for those upper grades. And I think that's huge, because a lot of it, like my district, we did not allow for elementary kids at all to take them home. And suddenly we had to pass them all out. And it's funny, even just the emotional part of that, because teachers that have had these, I mean, it took so long to get that 1-to-1. Teachers took care of these things like they were their prized possessions. And to even just give up their computers and send home and cross your fingers and hope that kids would take care of them. I mean, there's a lot to that. It's interesting. Dean, from that university level or from that technical college level, where were you guys at? Because that feels to me like it would be very different.
Oh, it's very different. I'll be honest. Technical education, we have everything from nuts to soup, and we've got to figure out a way to make a really good blend out of everything. And so for us, we had a Canvas initiative prior to the pandemic to make sure that our LMS was strong. What can be online should be online. And where we're competency-based, we were truly looking at what does a prior learning assessment look like in terms of mastery so that we can have a shorter run time for our students within the program. It makes sense to identify the level of learning, place them in a program-specific spot, and then move them forward. What was difficult was, without an LMS like Canvas, finding that landing spot so they can matriculate and move forward. That's a very difficult thing. So that really helped us to get our students at a point to where they could receive a really good entry point for whatever program they chose to enroll in. Some programs were easier than others to put, in a virtual setting. Business, not a lot had to go into that other than getting the things of school onto our LMS. How do you put CDL online? How are you going to put welding online? So this is where we had to think outside of the box. We weren't in a box, though. That was one of the things that we really got our minds wrapped around, is we weren't going to be pigeonholed as is it this or that. It's going to be both. What can be done online will be done online. What needs to be done face-to-face will be done face-to-face in the safest way possible so that we have that high trust, low fear with our students when they come back. So I would say we were all over the board. Moving forward, we are solid in the fact that if we had to go again to a more confined setting, we would be able to do so with much greater ease because of the work we've done on Canvas and then the procedures that we've put in place for returning students to school safely.
And for anybody that's listening that doesn't understand like what a technical college, I mean, they teach anything from, like he said, teaching people how to drive, commercial driver's license, to welding, to plumbing, to business courses. So some of those things really, you have to really kind of go outside. So much is hands-on that it's interesting. And Cher, I want to ask you, because yours is a little interesting, like the work you were doing with so many different schools was all already involved in Canvas and trying to get people set up digitally. But I have a feeling that it shifted from the theory of it to like instantly putting it into practice, and that had to shift gears for people.
Well, yes. And like Nancy said, so I support 16 districts with different initiatives, and 14 of them are Canvas schools. And even though we say we've implemented Canvas, it does not mean everyone's using Canvas. And so that shift is taking place into how do we make sure we're using best practice and we're all on the same page in this unified front. So that's been an interesting shift. It was interesting because a lot of our schools were piloting Canvas, and then all of a sudden we were thrust into this new reality. It's like, Shara, we have to train 300 people by next Monday, and we're going to do it all virtually. And you're like, okay, we can do that. Sure. Like, whatever, we can do that.
Are you Shara?
No, it was fine. We did a little train the trainer model. It was great. But the teachers were so receptive because they knew it was something that they needed to survive. I just thought, listening to Dean, though, I teach also, and I teach at a technical career kind of situation. And he was talking about what to make portable. I just want to shout out, we had a CNA instructor that was doing skills virtually using conferences and having kids practice skills. And it was impressive. Like, she was really thinking outside of the box. Like, I have to get these kids ready for the test. We can move content online, but they still have to practice their skills and they still need me for guidance. So how can we do that virtually? And she really did some great things. And so I was just thinking, as those technical, now the welding was a little trickier, but the skills was
burned some rock for that.
How funny. No, it's interesting, so we all kind of, it feels like as we talk to not just us, but people all across the country, we all were kind of in that same boat, that people were moving towards it. Teachers had some sort of preference for different LMS, but here we were stuck in this moment where in our district, they gave teachers 2 days to put everything online so instruction began. So Monday, teachers came in for a brief kind of info, getting things set up, and then by Wednesday, instruction had to start. And so at that point, for our teachers, the hardest part was trying to teach people a new LMS, like getting everybody on board. This systematic approach seemed not so possible. Not just that, I think we were trying to be kind to teachers and not throw something in, train them, and force them to use a specific platform. The interesting thing from my experience this past couple months is that teachers started realizing, there is a difference between platforms. And there are some things I wish I would have known. We had several teachers that chose to use Canvas, which was already an option for our district, and some that chose to stick with Google Classroom. And just hearing them talk as they started doing things. What was your experience, or what things did you learn the most or see from your teachers that kind of shifted that conversation to where we are now thinking there needs to be a systematic approach as we begin this idea of opening up schools in kind of a blended format or one or the other? What are some things that you noticed? Dean, for you guys, you guys are open now. You're in a more rural setting and it's deemed safe to be open. What are you guys thinking?
So as we looked at this as a staff, what we found out is the old African proverb of, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go as a group. For us, this was a huge gel point. Bing! And none of these are mine. It's just good things that educators, I think, should hear.
But they still rattle off your tongue like you used to
roll, right? No, it was a really good gel point. And for us, and for educators worldwide, I don't want to make a blanket statement, but it felt like we got knocked out third round. We came out into the ring, into the center of the arena, and we found ourselves laying on the canvas. Now, we had two options. We can look up or we can get up. But if we get up, we've got to do things differently if we want to stay up. And so for us, it was a non-negotiable that we were going to make the move to making sure everything that can be virtual is virtual, and what is live is quality and is safe. And really, those are the measures that we looked at. What can possibly be put online, And if what we can't put online has to be offered face-to-face, what are those procedures, protocols that we have to have in place to keep students safe? The reality is a lot of students have had a 8-9 month gap by the time they're going to be returning to school. How do we make just the sense of walking into a school feel normal again? I think that's the other thing that we realized is a lot of what we're doing is protecting the social and emotional well-being of our youth and our adult learners as well. So how do we make this a safe place where learning takes priority?
Yeah, I think that's, I think the foundation of why we are doing this virtual leadership series is because so many people have learned some of the same things that we have to, as we open up again, we have to do it better than we did it before. I come from what we feel is a large district of about 65,000 students, and nationwide that is a large district, but Nancy comes from a way bigger district, double our size and more. So Nancy, you see it from this systematic approach from so many schools. You're kind of leading out on that as one of the leaders over, what did you say, 15 different schools. How are you looking at this from a systematic perspective from all the things that you learned?
Well, I mean, I think that, being large can be, it can create unique challenges. It's difficult to implement change, especially like where consistency is really important. It's like moving a big battleship, right? But that being able to, we had the ability to bring things to scale pretty quickly. So for example, one thing we were able to solve for that really seemed to be a win for both our families as well as our teachers was in the Canvas platform. The first thing we did was just create videos for how to get where you need to, how to navigate Canvas easily, how to get where you needed to as a parent, as a kid, as a teacher, how to import stuff. So we just leveraged a lot of the great videos that were out there. And then we created this great instructional resource hub that had everything all in one place at your fingertips. So the teacher who's teaching now, her regular classroom, and now emphasizing the importance of also doing co-teaching with the EC teacher and the ESL teacher, could go to one place and find the general lesson, and then could go and find, what are some great strategies for me to modify that in a small group setting for my EC and my ELL learners. So I think we just realized how important that was, and that was a big win for us that we'll carry forward. Is we've got to make it accessible to people. The other thing we realized was around communication, and I know that that's something that we're going to be talking a lot about in our VLS series is, what are the things that we learned about communication, and how can we take that forward to streamline communication, to make sure that it's effective, to make sure that it's delivered in multiple ways and on easy to access platforms from the most vulnerable populations who at best might have a cell phone, in their hands for an hour or two, to, the mom or dad that has a computer or TV or whatever in every room. So just the importance of, individualizing and differentiating, I think, is critically important. And then making things streamlined and accessible.
I love that. There's a question here by Jennifer Pringle out there that says, how can we leverage the tools in Canvas with younger students who typically have only used tech with teacher supervision? And I'm going to really kick that off to Shara. I know, Shara, your background as a teacher is more secondary, but you've now had the pleasure of working with many elementary schools and more specifically with Canvas, implementing those. So to answer this question, but I also want you to go into a little bit of how having a systematic approach to like setting up and designing your Canvas course really helps that, especially if they have older siblings.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of what we noticed, and that was the feedback that our teachers were getting. You were kind of talking about systematic approach. We were getting so much feedback from parents that maybe they were having multiple points of entry, people were using all different platforms, and that itself has kind of led that conversation in the districts about, we should make this easier for everybody, right? And to the elementary conversation, I have had the pleasure of working with some elementary schools recently, and there are great resources out there, but I want people to realize it doesn't mean you have to let go of things you're already using. I was telling some elementary teachers recently, they're deeply invested in Seesaw. That's awesome. We can make Seesaw work with Canvas. Absolutely. So if you're going to use Seesaw every day, fantastic. But let's make Canvas the point of entry. Let's use Canvas for the communication. Let's give parents one place to go. And then let's branch off to those Seesaw activities from our homepage. And I was actually looking it up. If you're an elementary teacher right now, you want to join this Facebook page, and this is a plug, and I'm sorry, Canvas for Elementary. I have learned so much. There's a lady who started this Facebook group, and she shares awesome stuff. But the teachers in that group are all K2, and they're just sharing awesome resources like every day. And I am learning some stuff that I didn't know, but it's been a really great resource. So if you're in elementary right now, Canvas for Elementary, if you're a Facebook user, I would jump on board right now.
Nice.
And they're talking a lot about Bitmoji classrooms and how do you bring Bitmojis into the Canvas space? And I'm like, and I'm kind of a Bitmoji user, so I'm like going to have to learn it. My friend Nancy, I don't know where you are over there. She's helping me with that.
That's funny. No, it's interesting as we start looking at using Canvas across all the way through K-12. There's so many things that you can do to make it user friendly. And I think you hit on it, both Nancy and Cher both hit on the power of communication, and that landing page where students first go to, that's kind of our go-to. And, overall through all of this, we've had the chance to talk a lot, the four of us, and work with, each of us have been on webinars and things with leaders all across the country. And I think we've learned some really great best practices. And that's really what the virtual leadership series is about. And I love that it's in July. It's at a time where we kind of are wrapped up our school year, and now we have a chance to look forward and say, we don't know what August is going to look like for our students, but we can prepare for whatever comes. And I think using some of the tools that we have, some of the rubrics and planning sheets and planning guides that we've put out there, I think that's going to be super vital for people to look at how we move forward. One of the things, though, I want you to kind of talk a little bit more about when you talk about a landing page. For anybody out there that's not super familiar with that, what do you mean by that? How does that become such a powerful tool to help navigate learning at home?
So it is the first place of entry, right? And before, landing pages were like supposed to be pretty and there was buttons. And I keep telling people, I really moved into this, like, it needs to be functional right now kind of a space. And that's because I'm a teacher. And so I was using it better. But actually, Mark just did a session with some Canvas trainers too, who kind of also showed that same best practice about how you can use it to kind of make that, I don't want to say conform, but have that consistent space. I encourage people to think about a district-wide landing page. So for a lot of my school districts, we're creating a landing page, and it might look a little different from elementary than it does for the high school people. But for the most part, parents can figure out how they want to communicate with their teachers, what kind of sources of communication, and what different modes that they can communicate, when they can communicate, maybe if there's office hours. And then also it links off and kind of gives that, well, what we're doing is giving us, like, what are we doing this week? And back to our session, we're going to be sharing something called the Fundamental 5. And that landing page really should be answering some fundamental questions for kids. Like, how can I get help if I need help? What am I supposed to be doing today? What is the assignment for today? So that landing page can answer a lot of those questions. But if you think about it on a district level, now we're talking about that united front, one place of entry. It's consistent. Parents know where to go. We're not taking, autonomy away from teachers. We still want them to be creative and innovative and build content, and they're the master of their craft. But we can prepare teachers and parents and students for maybe a more consistent experience in the fall. And we consider that landing page to be part of that. And we're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about best practice in that second session of our VLS, our virtual learning series. And we're going to talk about best practices in Canvas and how we can do that systematically. So I'm excited about it. But here's another thing. I was working with leaders yesterday, and I made this comment like, you can message all parents in one button. And it was like, what? And I'm like, yeah, didn't know that. But yeah, you have to remember, this isn't just students we're talking about. This could be parents, but also consider using it in your district, as a system, maybe to make some of your systems portable that you use with your faculty and your staff too. So sorry, that was more than you asked for. I apologize.
No, but that was perfect, because I think one of the pieces that I'm most excited about too, that getting people access to rubrics that you've created, so that really I want to shift our conversation today to the whole leadership of it. when you talk about teachers giving teachers autonomy and everything, that's so important. But yet, as leaders, we still have to monitor and make sure that what's happening in the virtual world or at school is high quality instruction that's getting kids the information they need to drive them forward. So talk about that, Dean. You have so many teachers doing so many different things. How do we assure that we're providing high quality instruction, whether it's digital or remotely or on site?
Well, I think the first thing as a good ed leader is am I connected enough with my staff to identify their abilities within the new age of education that we find ourselves in? I do think it's inhumane to expect, first year horse to run a 2-mile pace with an experienced horse. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense. We're all not going to run a 6-minute mile, essentially. So if we're running at a 13-minute mile pace, what supports do we need for our teachers so that they can become more proficient? Because at the end of the day, your school is oftentimes judged by your weakest teacher or the weakest output that your school puts out there. So how do we strengthen that teacher? How do we tell them in a very safe way as an ed leader, it's okay to not be okay moving forward? What's not okay is to not be willing to take the steps to get you where you need to be. What resources and tools do we need to put in place in order to help you? And really, for us, it came back down to asking a question. Is this form of education great enough for my own student? If the answer is yes, let's move forward. And great is the operative word in that sentence. Is it great enough? We can't just put out a product and hope. Hope's not a strategy. What are we doing to ensure that what we're putting out there is great? We've got a beta. We've got to go through and ask for feedback. We've got to be more connected with our students than ever before, whether that's face-to-face or virtually. We have got to be very good curators of feedback so that we can make better meaning for our students as we move forward. And I think that's been the biggest takeaway that we've had is the hyper focus on being a great person to land information with and then act on that information. If we're going to solicit data from someone, we have a moral obligation to use that data to better the outcome. And that's what we've really been focusing on.
That's funny because that last statement that you made is such a powerful one about the purpose of assessment. And as you guys were talking, it's kind of, to me, it's funny listening because, one of the first sessions, Dean, is about the power of leadership throughout a changing or evolving educational setting, and really helping set the stage and providing kind of a planning tool for how are we preparing. And then Shara talking about the LMS. Session 2 talks about the power of an LMS and how to really look at the work your teachers are doing, how to evaluate, how to providing a rubric to say, are these pieces in place so that we're providing the best format or the best kind of landing page and getting teachers on board. And then that third session really talks about assessment. And, that is kind of my baby. That's my world, is really learning how to use assessments to really drive instruction and how to pinpoint learning and move kids through that proficiency scale or whatever you use to get towards mastery. And that's a piece, even in my own school, where our teachers have really worked to build incredible scales to really be able to pinpoint learning. Some of that fell apart over the past couple months, and it was really like a pain point for me. And that's something that we really want to talk about and help leaders in that third session look at. How are we assessing students even from a distance so that we can use that data and strengthen PLCs, even if we're not all together in a building? How do we use data in PLCs to modify and adjust our instruction so that we know that our students are learning? And I know that that's not just my school that was struggling with that over the past couple months. I think there was such a push to just put information out there so that kids could see their teachers' faces, that assessing students for the purpose of knowing where to go next and how to provide individualized instruction and intervention really fell off a little bit. It took us a while in our building to even figure out how do we group students based on need from the things that we're seeing. And so I'm excited for session 3 to help take leaders through that process from things we learned, not just from my own school, but from schools all over, and some incredible leaders that we've worked with throughout the country. And how are we making sure that we're monitoring students' learning so that we can push them forward? And that kind of leads me to that next piece then. Nancy, will you talk a little bit about how do we monitor the instruction in a virtual, whether it's virtual or blended? We kind of feel as kind of expert leaders here that many schools, as we open up in August, will either provide instruction at school or at home, but many or most schools will have to kind of offer a blended piece for to kind of be sensitive to situations for different families. So how do you keep track of all that as a leader, Nancy?
Well, I mean, I think that our leaders really leaned into just using trackers to be able to, and so we use Zoom as for our live instruction, our synchronous PLC meetings and those kinds of things. And so our school leaders got really great at just creating almost like they'd have like the schedule of when live instruction was going on, when PLCs were going on, and then the links to everything. So then as the leader, I can jump into, a classroom and kind of see how things are going, a small group instruction that's led, by an EC teacher or a PLC, so that I can answer some why questions about why we're shifting, because we're shifting so much. It was really important for leaders to be able to firsthand sometimes just stay focused on the why that we're doing and how this really makes best sense for kids, and staying focused on kids. The other thing I talked with some of our leaders about was, dropping in on a classroom. Everybody was feeling so vulnerable. And so dropping in on a classroom for a seasoned veteran teacher might have felt just fine. I love your input, but for a struggling or a brand new teacher, that didn't feel so comfortable. So some of my leaders were doing things like, just hit record on 2 or 3 of your sessions, and let's talk about ones that you recorded and felt comfortable enough to share with me that we can do some coaching around. So I think, we've got to think creatively about different ways that we can coach and support continued growth for our teachers to make sure that they're getting what they need to be, the best that they can be for our kids.
You said something beautiful, Nancy. You said coach. You said coach my teachers.
Yeah,
yes,
coaching.
We got to coach. And the other thing that you mentioned that I think is so critical, where the shepherd sits amongst the flock matters. You're with those sheep. You are with that flock. Not that teachers are sheep or that students are sheep, but you are the leader, and you have to be in those virtual settings to get an authentic read of what's happening or what's not. I love, love, love that you're adding that intentional focus on being connected during this time. I think that's just spot on, Nancy. Way to go.
Be present, right? Be present and invested.
That's right.
Well, and I love just that idea. I think naturally we're used to just popping into a classroom, and so that can be incredibly intimidating for teachers in this setting that they're not as comfortable with. And the funny thing is, the veteran teacher that would have welcomed you in a room at any time of day, any day of the year, suddenly becomes the teacher that's not so comfortable with technology. So it's funny how tables turned a little bit. But I love that advice about allowing teachers to record a few and then picking the one that they share with you, so that it really becomes about coaching at your best instead of being seen at your worst for a teacher. I think that's really, really powerful. It's so interesting. I think even just hearing this conversation, we hear little tidbits of things like, oh, I want to know more about that. Like with Nancy, I want to see examples of how other leaders have mapped that out or kind of created a schedule. As simple as that is, everyone can figure out how to do it on their own, but sometimes it's so nice to be able to see what does that look like for somebody else, just so I can get a picture of it, so that then I can go out and plan my own. And that is the power of these virtual sessions, is to be able to see all of that. And of course, those are 2-hour sessions each, and we really walk participants through it more than just kind of talking about it and putting it out there. As teachers and principals are looking at summer, it's different this year. I know we've noticed that even in our own district. Yesterday I got an email from our technology department with a list of 20 classes or courses that they're teaching teachers. The teachers can log in at any time. How are you guys addressing? I know, Sherry, you thought you'd be done and have a little summer break, and your PD has just, I mean, totally taken over your calendar. How are you guys looking at that over the summer to prepare?
A lot of schools are scrambling, but we have this statewide initiative that I just mentioned, and we are asking schools to sign up by June 19th. So the rest of my summer is really not known yet. And we have a lot of districts that are wanting professional development, but I'm really trying to encourage districts. And it's kind of like we're talking at leadership. I can come and train your people. Absolutely. However, you need to have your own resident expert, or you need to be able to sustain that, So when we're talking about professional development, just like anything, how are we going to support that and sustain that within our own buildings? Or do we have people to support the work that's coming to be done? And like Nancy said, one of my favorite things right now is I have leaders that are so invested and they want to be a part of it. And I did some trainings recently where they were all in attendance, from the curriculum coordinator to the superintendent to the principal. I haven't had as many administrators as I've had recently, because they realize it impacts them, and they're the ones getting the feedback from the parents that it's not working for them. So they're invested in, how do we make this better? As my summer, I'm not really sure. We just wrapped up a 2-day conference here in Nebraska called the Future Ready Conference. And last year we had 175 people attend. We had 1,750 people on today at our virtual session. And so you can tell that there is this need and there is this desire to learn. But as I was sitting with some of my friends around a table last night that are all teachers in my old district, they're exhausted. Yeah. And they need to take some time for themselves too. So it's like this happy balance, and I'm feeling it too. I'm like, I just want to go on vacation. And I feel like educators, although we need to prepare, I think mentally we have to kind of like refresh and renew and, re-energize ourselves, because we're all being so bombarded by all these opportunities and these things we have to learn. And how do we balance? That's the word, balance. How do we balance that all so that we can stay mentally strong and to be able to start our new year? So it's exciting work. It's exciting work, great conversations, great things happening, but it can be exhausting.
Yeah, one thing I think is really exciting is that, yes, we were all thrust into this. Teachers had to adapt and change things that they never wanted to. But as they're looking back, and especially as we wrapped up our year and did some teacher exit interviews and things, what's really exciting to me is that they see the connection to this not just being a distance thing, but using some of these same strategies and tools and the format to better teach students. I mean, I'll just talk in our elementary world that I'm working in right now. We're seeing teachers realizing I can record lessons that are tailored for specific students, so that they could actually do that on their device while I'm working with a small group, instead of a worksheet that's a little less meaningful, or different things. And they're starting to become really excited about learning more about Canvas. So it's funny. Yes, they're burned out, and yes, they did things that they never thought they'd have to do. But now they're making that connection to like, oh, I can like actually make this meaningful forever. So it becomes not just a, oh crap, we had to go through this during this crazy time in the world, but being a jumping off point for how we change learning in the classroom.
And like, it's an opportunity, right? Because a lot of our teachers are finding that kids can show what they know in a variety of ways. It doesn't have to be a worksheet. It doesn't have to be, this fill in the blank little puzzle. It can be something that's completely out of the box, like a video vlog. Or maybe I had an FCS teacher who talked about how when they were remote, they were having all these kids do video vlogs of what they're doing in their buildings, whether it's sewing a button on or whether they're making a meal for their family. But all of a sudden we're integrating technology and maybe some other producing kind of things, and we're integrating our FCS. And so kids are able to show what they know in more than just one way. So I think people are really open to that too, which is awesome.
Dean, did you have a comment?
She nailed it. Just thinking outside of the box, I think is really, don't put yourself in a box in this. Chaos creates one of two things. It creates casualties or opportunity. As I look at the opportunities we have right now, what we plant in the summer, we're going to harvest in the fall. And that's for teachers, and that's for admin, and that's for district admin as well. What are we doing at a district level to really train our admin on what does it mean to support teachers in a virtual setting? As admin, what are we doing for our teachers to ensure that they understand what is really good virtual learning look like? How are we going to provide feedback on that? And from a teacher's perspective, how do we ensure that we're getting that communication piece from the student to the teacher to the admin? So really we have a 360 view of what our impact is as we start moving these levers of education, regardless of what modality we find ourselves in. So I think it's just being very intentional of what we choose to put in the ground and what we choose to give water to.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great way of summing up the whole purpose of this leadership series, is to walk people through, give them the information and the tools, so that then in that final session, they're able to really come up with a plan to plant so that they can grow the right crop. Nancy, what are some of your final thoughts as we're thinking about all of this?
Well, I know I can share. I saw something, a question in the comments about, if we're planning for this whole, could be remote, could be hybrid, could be like, how do we plan within an LMS? And I think one of the cool things that we're kind of playing around with and tossing around in Charlotte, kind of it alludes to some of the things that that my co-leaders have been talking about, is just embracing some of the positives that we've seen in this environment. So in many cases, we're creating the shell of we're actually creating the course as in its totality, like recorded, lectures or mini lessons and those kinds of things with uploaded resources, so that kids at that grade level could experience that course, either live or in hybrid, or so that we're not creating different realities. I don't think anybody's got the bandwidth or the time right now to do that. So I just encourage leaders to think about, how can you plan sort of one way and then use that LMS, platform, and use it in smart ways, so that even if you're live, students really could benefit from seeing that teacher lecture ahead of time, being able to pause it, listen to it again, come up with some really great, I really understand this part, but I need to ask more about this when I'm live with my teacher. So, it really does, asynchronous and synchronous blended and hybrid thoughts provide lots of great opportunities for teachers to be even more fully engaged. They're not messing with, technology and being at a board and, all of those kinds of things. When they're in a small group, they're totally student focused, and they're able to see what students are able to do and demonstrate. And it does provide, as we said earlier, students to be able to get the information in the way that works best for them, and to be able to represent their knowledge in the way that works best for them. So how can we capitalize on those things and see those as great new opportunities based on understandings that we never had before this year?
Yeah. And I think there's an appetite for it right now.
Yeah.
A genuine, it's like Sharon said with her teachers, there's this genuine excitement for changing and adapting learning just because of all this. And I think teachers have kind of a head start, because they've kind of been forced to do it. And even for our veteran teachers, some of whom were pretty afraid of the technology at the beginning, even they can see themselves record. I mean, I remember doing a session a couple of years ago on video recording your lesson and going through and self-evaluating your instruction. And teachers were so did not want to see themselves on camera. And now teachers have been used to being on video. They're seeing their face as they're talking to their students. And even just that change, I think we're kind of the beginning of a new era for education, and it's exciting. We recognize that many kids prefer learning in a different environment than school anyway, and they're thriving. It's not all a bad thing. So I think the work that we have to do as leaders is figure out, how do we put all of these great pieces in place so we can provide the best education possible for our students. And I think that's what this virtual leadership series really does. It walks us through and helps us create a plan. So this was a great conversation today. You guys are my favorite people. So I'm really always happy to have a chat with you guys. The link should be accompanying this recording, and I think they put it up on some of the chats. If you have any questions about this virtual leadership series that starts in July, please feel free to reach out. We're excited for those 4 sessions to really help leaders focus on what we know works and how to prepare for ever-changing and evolving schools in the future. So thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.